What a horrible opening that is. I gotta be honest with you people. It is a horrible opening that we have on the Red Alert podcast. I gotta do a lot better. We're gonna get a new music because the Red Wings are kicking ass and taking names. So it is what it is. But I'm welcomed by my guest, my co-host, my guest, my friend, Miss
All
Cindy.
of the above.
Yeah. So we obviously took a little 2 week hiatus. I don't know if people noticed, which they probably did because I got a couple of messages asking if we were still doing the podcast. And I said, yeah, it's been a crazy week. Last week I think the week before you were sick or something, and I had the Lions going on, so I was kind of knee deep in the Lions coverage. And then, the week after, we were supposed to do the podcast Wednesday. I said, that's a good idea that we can't do it Wednesday because there was a situation that developed with the missus, and you know, might be a well, am gonna be a dad, so that's gonna be fun. But it's all good. We're all good in the hood now. Because
You're
I
going to
was
make such a good dad, Joe. See, what you got to tell people is that you're being proactive here. You are starting the next Red Wings rebuild with an 18-year lead time.
yeah. Oh,
See,
exactly. I mean,
that's what we're doing here. You're
what
actually growing.
whatever.
Your lady is growing. The missus is growing a future Red Wing.
Yeah, and we don't know what sex it is right now, but if it's a girl or it's a guy, I mean, I imagine that they're gonna get involved in some kind of sport because they're gonna be the size of me and the missus, so they're gonna be a person that's not gonna be like a pushover. So, and I know that they're gonna kind of develop things off of me, but I was like, look, I was like, it could be the next gold medal hockey for USA hockey women's team, or it could be the next great Red Wing. So we're all good.
That's right. And you got to get those little skates. Those little tiny skates are the cutest thing there ever was.
Well, someone told me when this happened, he was like, "You got to go to this website, and you got to get these skates for the little one." I was like, "How little were we talking?" He's like, "Well, I started my kid at 3 years old."
Yeah.
I was like, "Holy crap!" And then the one guy, his friend or whatever, his kid plays in the NHL, and he plays for a really notable team that is in the discussions for Stanley Cup right now. And he was like, he was like, yeah, I got my kid started at 3 too. I was like, well, got to get it started early. Got to get him, used to everything, and it'll be fun.
That's right.
So I was laughing because a lot of people, including like when I told you and everything this weekend, that was pretty cool. But I was like, I got to mention something on the podcast, and then I also have to mention the last time we did a podcast, you were just saying, look, I really think the Red Wings are going to lose to Tampa Bay, and I think they're going to lose to Dallas. And I was like, no, I think they're going to win against Dallas and Tampa Bay, and they're going to lose against Florida. Well, you're right.
What? What was that? One more time? I was what? Right?
Yeah, you were right. Yeah, you
I
were
know
right.
this is killing you to say I was right, but I was, you know what? Because I'm right most of the time. This is what I try to tell my staff and my family. I'm like, y'all have known me now for years. Don't you know I'm usually right? Like 99.8% of the time. But I'm good. Well, I'll tell you what, I've got some predictions for this next 4-game stretch, and we'll see if the trend continues, because I don't know, we might have to call Vegas, or we'll have Vegas calling. All the sharps will be calling and saying, "What does Cindy say?"
We need a Vegas Cindy segment
That's
of the
right.
podcast. You know what I'm
That's
saying?
right.
Where she just rifles off picks, and if you don't make money off of them, that's your fault. That's
That's
literally your
right.
fault.
We'll
Because if I
call
would
it
have
bet. We'll call it bet it all, baby.
because if I would have took your like little 3 game spread, I could have really did some things, but I didn't. And I thought they were going to lose against Florida. They won against Florida. I thought they were going to lose. I thought they were going to win against Dallas and in the uh, Tampa Bay, and they won. They lost obviously, so it is what it is.
Well, they got a tough 4-game stretch here coming up. You know, the West Coast, Western Canada, or whenever they go out to California and the West Coast is always tough for the Wings. Historically, it's always been a challenge for them.
Yep.
And I don't think this is going to be any different. I think they're going to end up coming out of this, you know, probably at 500. I think what's going to happen is they're going to go into roll into Edmonton. I think they're going to lose to Edmonton. But by the time they hit Calgary, they're going to kind of hit their stride. And, you know, the thing is with Edmonton, too, Edmonton's fighting with Vegas for that top spot and vision. So I think they've got something to fight for. You're going to roll into Calgary. By the time they come into Calgary, they're going to kind of be used to the time change. They're going to be getting into the groove, and they're going to want to get the one back that they're probably going to lose against Edmonton and, you know, the Connor over there. So I think they're going to take Calgary. By the time they go into Vancouver, I think it's probably likely they're going to lose to Vancouver because Vancouver's on a bit of a heater themselves right now. Vancouver's hot. I think they're probably going to lose to Vancouver, but I think they're going to pick up a win against Seattle. So that's my prediction, Joe. Win, lose, win, lose. Win against Calgary and Seattle, and I think they're going to lose against the Canucks and Edmonton.
So you got them going 2-2.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah. I knew you were. Well, I didn't know you were, but I just, I kind of figured that you were going to go with that. The funny thing is, I really don't think that Vancouver is a team to be really worried about right now because I don't know if you follow the Canadian media. I mean, we don't like our media in the United States. A lot of us are kind of like turned off by the media. I know you, as an elected official, kind of don't like the media because some of the way they spin things, which,
I love the media, Joe. I love the media.
I will tell you what, man. Some of these media people, they're just really they love to spin things. So I love listening to Canadian media, and the reason I love listening to Canadian media because everything about their hockey teams, they will make into some orchestrated big deal. So Vancouver right now they're having a little bit of issues in the locker room. Is leading a team and in the political realm, that sometimes feelings can get hurt. Well, supposedly there's a rift between, Elias Pettersson and JT Miller, and even their GM went out and said that there was a rift in the locker room. And I'm like, bro, do you ever take PR lessons? Like, that it's not good to say. Just not good to say. And the Canadian media is just ripping it apart. They're like, Canadian media, they will trash these hockey teams, and that's probably a reason they don't win Stanley Cups because it's really rough in the Canadian markets.
Well, they got to learn, right? They got to take a lesson from Bill Clinton, who, by the way, I met way back in 1992. And they got to take a lesson from Bill Clinton. And the tactic is deny, deny, deny. And when you get caught, apologize. So that's what these guys got to do. But, there's been a couple of those leaks into the media lately about, some of this locker room stuff. And I got to tell you, I'm not buying it. I think it's all being done for a reason. I don't think any of it's legit. And I'll tell you why. I think it's just head games. I really do, Joe, because
the general manager confirmed one in Vancouver, but I just like,
I don't buy it.
Yeah, you could be right.
Dude, I still don't buy it. And I'll tell you why. Because I have talked to way too many NHL players. And the one thing about them, like regardless of who I'm talking to, whether it's a guy who was in the league 20 years ago or a guy's in the league 20, right now, these guys, when it comes to what happens in the locker room and what's said, no matter how much they trust me and how good of friends we are or whatever, it doesn't matter. I don't think they tell their wives what happens in that locker room. They don't say anything. So the fact that the idea that something is leaking out of the locker room, whenever anybody hears that in the media, I think it's being leaked for a reason, and it's a matter of playing the psychological game. Yeah. For sure. Even from a GM, because I'll tell you what, my experience with a lot of these players too, they don't necessarily talk to the GM much. I mean, they might talk to him once when they sign them, and then they just don't talk to him very much. They don't, those two groups don't really mesh, and so that's just been what I've come across. So I'm not buying that. Just saying, I'm still sticking with my picks.
It's interesting because I'm just saying Elias Pettersson or JT Miller, if they're up for a trade, Stevie Y hit him up. Maybe you can get him on a little bit of a bargain deal. You know what I'm saying? If it's true. If it's not true, well, I think Stevie Y is going to go shopping anyways because this team right now, I'm telling you right now, Cindy, this team is playing really, really good. And I was going to text you the other night. I think they're playing. It was the game against who they play on Monday. It was the Kings, wasn't
Mhm.
the Kings? And I was going to
Yeah.
text you, and I was going to be like, wow, this Albert Johansson kid, this Marco Casper kid, they're really turning the corner. And me and you have said for a couple of um, years now, we said, look, just trust what the plan is, the Yzerplan. And I thought that this could be a good thing for us to talk about because, you know, a lot of people, including some people that were like, oh, the Yzerplan just not really real. The Yzerplan, it's kind of jagged. And I look at this like we're starting to see the little things come to fruition a little bit. It's not that the players are playing better, which we knew that they would play better under a new coach. Me and you both kind of agreed to that. But
Yeah.
it seems like these younger players under McLennan, they've hit another high. Like they've hit the high of the high. Like they're starting to play really good hockey. Johansson's having a great. I think he has 6 out of 10 where he scored a point. And Marco Casper scored 11 has 11 points in 10 games. He is 6 out of 10 through the last 10 games. And I just look at these guys, man. Like Edvinson, he looks great. Casper looks great. Johansson looks great under McLennan. And we kind of hinted at this, and a lot of people are like, we got some messages that said, oh, Lalonde's gonna get it correct. And I was like, I don't know about that, but you could be, it's good to hope, right? But I just thought there was nothing that was happening. But when we look at these guys that are, come up the ranks, I mean, look at the Axel Sandin Pellikka kid that's coming up from Sweden. They're saying that he could be up by the end of the year, depending on how the Swedish Elite Hockey League playoffs go. But they have a really good team, so they might go deep in the playoffs. But you never know. And I just look at it and I go, man, if you could add a Pellikka at the end of the year for the playoffs, oh man, that could be great.
Yeah, I think, it's interesting because I've got friends in both camps, right? I've got friends who are 110 million% behind Steve Yzerman. Either they played with him or they just worked with him and they got a lot of respect for him. And, they are loyal to the core. And so they're always going to say that the Yzerplan is working, but you got to be patient. And I got to give him this, Steve never came in and said, we're going to have a playoff team in 3 years or 5 years. I think it's everybody else who said that. I don't remember Steve ever putting a time limit on it because he had to wait for certain things to happen, right? He had to wait for these kids to be ready. He had to wait for certain things to expire. It was a situation like that. It wasn't like it's going to happen in 5 years. He never put an expiration date on when the Yzerplan would be ready, right? It was everybody else who was doing that. So, but at the same time, I've got friends in the other camp who are like, Steve Yzerman was a great player. I'm not taking that away from him, but he's a horrible GM and he doesn't know how to manage a team. He doesn't know how, he's letting the team run him and all kind of stuff like that. Right. So here's my, I would say unbiased because I have an unbiased opinion on it. I see where they're both coming from. My opinion on the Yzerplan is this. What's working and what wasn't working, or, if we were going to critique Steve Yzerman, right? I think the one thing he's done, not one thing, but one of the things that's made a difference for this team and what he's done right is properly getting these kids up through the system. Yeah. We saw brilliance in these guys 2-3 years ago. You spotted Marco Casper off the hop, and he is a stud. That kid is going to be a stud. All these guys that are getting contracts, Joe, I think we nailed most of them. And you had an eye for those guys when they were in juniors or when they were playing on USA Hockey or wherever they were at.
Yeah, Swedish Elite Hockey League, all
in the system. Stuff, yeah, you spotted them right off the bat. So we alerted, if you were watching and listening to the Red Alert podcast, you knew about these guys 3 years ago. This is no surprise to our listeners who've been with us for a while.
Yeah.
Like I've always said, you're going to hear it here first because we are deep, deep, deep undercover, aren't we?
Yes, we are. I think you were the one that hit on the cider one. You like the cider the most.
Oh, cider's my guy. Yeah. Well,
I thought Lucas Raymond was going to be a star, and boy, is
You
he
did.
bustling into being a star. He's on pace
Yeah.
for 92 points. I mean, like you said, it's kind of it wasn't going to be like this quick rebuild because hockey rebuilds are never really quick. A lot of people they have this unrealistic expectation that you could rebuild a team really quick and all that jazz. And you got to look at the hockey rebuilds throughout the years. I mean, like the average one is 7 to 8 years before you get good. I mean, unless you get one of those dime in a dozen players where you get like a Bedard or a Matthews or McDavid or a McKinnon or a Makar, like it doesn't really work that way. Like I wish it was faster, and I think Stevie Y wishes it was faster, to be honest. But
But he was patient. Steve is real patient. But I'll tell you this, Joe, and I mean to cut you off, but
no, you're good.
the one thing that I think he was too patient about, the one mistake that one, not the one, again, I'm gonna screw that up. One of the mistakes that Steve Yzerman's made, and I think he would tell you this, he stuck with these head coaches too long. He stuck with Blashill too long. He stuck with Lalonde at least a season too long. Lalonde should have never started this season. He should have had McLennan on board in the off season, ready to start this season. I think he stuck with his head coaches too long, both of them. And so that's one of the things I think mistakes that he made. But as far as this team that's coming up now, I'll tell you, there's another one, and we've told people about him from the hop, and that was Kosa. Wait till they see what Sebastian Kosa is going to end up becoming.
Great Augustine too. I think Augustine's a really good player. Yeah,
they're going to be an amazing tandem if they keep holding them together. And I'll tell you, and I said this, and people thought I was crazy. In fact, one of the guys who we both know might be listening right now, I said to him, these guys that are in the system, and I talked about Edvinsson, and we're talking about 2-3 years ago, Edvinsson, Kosa, Cass, all these guys, right? I said, I see another 2002 team coming together with these young guys in the system. I'm willing to bet you've got at least 2 Hall of Famers, future Hall of Famers in there, if not more. And they're all going to be coming up at the same time.
I look at a guy like Lucas Raymond. He's playing out of his mind. Like I said, he's on pace for 92 points. He could potentially get to 100 points, to be honest, because it's not that much of a big difference. Because if he has a couple big games over the next couple of weeks, he can go up to 93, 95 in a hurry. But yeah, you look at these players on the team like Sider. He's a great player, just a fantastic player. Edvinsson is playing fantastic. I thought he's been one of the keys to this team this year. And then you look at a guy like Albert Johansson, and you look at Marco Kasper, who I said was going to be a pretty damn good player, and I was steadfast on it. Now, is he going to be like this all around Connor McDavid? No, that's a one of one. You don't have many of those guys in the NHL. Actually, there's no one in the NHL like Connor McDavid, so it really doesn't matter. So I mean, I laugh at people because, first of all, I think that Stevie Y was given a raw deal because people were. You're right about the coaches. He did keep Blashill too long. He did keep Derek Lalonde too long. We were right saying that he should have been fired before this season. And unfortunately for the Red Wings, they suffered with it. And I think if I'm being honest, there was probably a veteran player that went to Steve Yzerman and said, "This can't continue. Like, this literally can't continue. You guys are gonna kill these young kids because they're not getting the time that they deserve playing and everything, and because the coach is trying to save his ass." And that's exactly what I was worried about. I see a guy like Todd McLennan. He comes in, he's all like, "I'm putting Kasper on the first line." You see what Kasper is doing on the first line. He's looks right up there with them. You know what I'm saying? He's playing with Larkin and Raymond. He's really doing a damn good job at that. And then you see like what Johansson's doing with more ice time. He was, you think he's close to a point per game player over the last like couple games. So, I mean, I just look at these guys, man, and the young kids are really turning out, and there's more young kids to come. Like, that's the thing that people don't understand. Like, I think a lot of people, they look at this team and they go, well, there's Larkin and there's DeBrincat and there's Patrick Kane. And I'm like, I think the kids, the studs, are coming relatively soon. And we're seeing Lucas Raymond really develop into a stud.
Well, sure. I mean, and look at the performance that these guys have put in, and that this team, look what this team has done with two major stars out of the lineup, Kane and Tarasenko, right? And these young kids stepped up and made it happen. And Dylan Larkin is really showing his leadership now, too. I mean, this guy is really carrying the load. Absolutely, 100%. Yeah, I'm looking at that. Dylan Larkin, stud. Raymond, stud. Sider, stud. Soon to be stud. 100%. That's right. And so when you see what can be done, here's where I think another turning point, okay, in terms of approach. Instead of bringing people in from the outside, they were bringing them up from within their ranks. Yep. And that has made a huge difference. I think that was the approach. And I realized Steve's hesitancy to allow that because he wanted proper development of these young players. And kudos to him for that. I get it. But at the same time, you know what? I think they could have brought a guy like Dominic Shine up sooner than they did. You know, there's a couple guys that have been in Grand Rapids for a long time that are pretty reliable in terms of performance that could have been brought into this lineup and brought up to the big club, sooner than they were, or some guys haven't been brought up yet. So I'm really happy for Dominic Shine. In fact, he was one of the guys that when I was at training camp a couple of years, I said, hey man, this guy's pretty good. And I was wondering, how come I'm not seeing him on NHL ice? I mean, he's obviously, he's a depth forward, right? He's a depth guy, but you need those guys. And the way that he just stood out among some of the other prospects or guys that were there in terms of from the Griffins and stuff. So I didn't quite understand why he wasn't getting time, but I think you could be right. It could be a matter of these coaches are trying to save their jobs. They don't want to take a chance, so they're sticking with all these, like what I would call more your marquee players or your NHL kind of guys that have been in the league already. They were going the safe route. But what happened was, and you saw this with Lalonde a lot, Lalonde liked the safe route. So did Blashill, but Lalonde liked it even more. Very conservative, wants to take the safe route, wants to ice the guys who, are reliable NHL players with experience. And, then they were playing this, they were dumping the puck in and playing this dump and chase game. And that it was not working. It might have been the safe plays, but the safe plays aren't working. You got to get on the edge if you want to be a champion. And I don't understand why Derek Lalonde, maybe it's just his personal style, Joe, but he had to have seen this with Tampa Bay. They had to get, that team was on the edge, but he was also trying to play, I think, the Tampa Bay style in Detroit, which was fast. We didn't have speed. You don't have speed, can't play a speed game. So he was just trying to fit a square peg into a round hole. And so I think that was another one of the big changes in this team with McClellan versus Lalonde. And that is bringing them up, not bringing them in.
Yeah, when you look at the way I can understand why Steve Yzerplan didn't really want to bring up these guys early on. And I mean, if you look at the Buffalo Sabres, that's a reason why you really don't want to bring kids up too early, because honestly, Buffalo is just a team that, like, you're kind of looking at them and you're going, what do they do right? Like, what do the Buffalo Sabres do right? Like, they've been rebuilding as long as I can remember, since 2008, I believe, and they have gotten nowhere. And they got some really good players on the team, but I really don't think they know how to win. And that's the thing. And when you look at, this rebuild and the Red Wings rebuild, I think what the thing that Yzerplan had to do this year was they had to win. I think it's important that they start a winning culture again. You know what I'm saying? It's been enough of the losing and all that jazz. You've lost enough. It's been, you last year got close. Let's get to the playoffs this year. That's the whole goal. And with Derek Lalonde, he wasn't going to do that. The team didn't shoot as much. We're starting to see McLennan's teams, they're shooting in the high 25s, 27s, 28s. They're getting to 30 shots a game, and that's how you win games. And Lalonde's, I mean, there was games that we won that 1-0 game against New York Islanders. We had 11 shots on goal. Do you win like that in the NHL? Absolutely not. But that's exactly what Derek Lalonde was, preaching to that team. Like, let's have shot selection. You could have a shot selection like that when you're a team like Tampa Bay, because, when you got a guy like Kucherov and Point and all these guys, yeah, you could have, and guys like puck movers like Hedman and everything. Yeah, you could have guys, you could have a shot selection like that. But in the grand scheme of things, that really don't work that way. You're really playing a game that's playing to lose, in my opinion. And Derek Malone, he didn't seem like an aggressive type, and that's what cost him. And I look at guys like Dan Campbell. I look at guys like AJ Hinch, aggressive guys that will change their method of madness, during the game. And I think Todd McClellan's been
Yeah.
doing that. I think that's been the key thing here. And I think with these young kids coming in and getting more playing time, I think that's been the recipe for this team actually starting to pull ahead.
Well, I think one of the things that McClellan brings to the table that Lalone didn't have is that just the experience. Again, you cannot replace experience. You really can't, because he has more rabbits he can pull out of his hat. And he's more comfortable doing that, right? So where Lalonde, I think, was really stuck into a very solid structure, I think, McClellan's a lot more situational based kind of guy. Yeah, and that has helped out tremendously. And then you can't understate the improvement on special teams. Yes. I mean, our special teams improvement has contributed greatly to the success that the Red Wings have had lately. And that's just huge. I mean, what are we, number 4 right now?
Yeah, something like that.
Power play, yeah.
And power plays and everything, yeah.
Power plays, penalty kills. I mean, they're just extraordinary. They're just exceeding expectations, I think, or exceeding previous performance so far on special teams, that in those clutch situations, when you find yourself either in an area of opportunity on a power play, or you find yourself in an area of you got to hold the line on a PK or whatever, you've got those units that are performing as units. You don't have individuals skating out there now. What I see is unit play. I didn't see that under Lalonde.
No,
not at all. And in my opinion, you really see it on special teams. The other thing that I'm excited about that I see that I think is factored into success too, and I yell at the TV. Jeff yells at me because I yell at the TV. And he's like, you tell him, and it's like, I'm like, get out of the D zone, man. You got to get back, spend time in the offensive zone. If you're in the O zone, you're going to get more shots. And if the puck isn't in the D zone, you don't have to worry about defending it so much. If your D is weak, don't be in that zone. I mean, it's not rocket science here. And they had to win more battles in the neutral zone too. So I think their neutral zone, I wouldn't say they're dominant in the neutral zone, but they're far improved in their performance in the neutral zone, and they're staying on the right end of the ice. And that's, I think, whatever's causing all of those things. And there's probably some underlying factor like just play effing hockey, right? Yep. And these guys know how to play. McClellan's letting them play.
Well, since McLennan took over, they're 11-3-1, which is fantastic. The power play has been the best in the league. The PK has made strides, weight lifted off shoulders, and the young players are blossoming. This is all the things that we're seeing right now. But, the one thing I really recognize with this team, to be honest, is Larkin's playing better. He's at a 70% point clip right now. And I do agree with that tweet that was from Jim Acosta, because, we've seen Dylan Larkin over the years take so much brunt of the fan base, right? All the time. They would come ask him questions, and usually Lalone and Blashill they would avoid the questions, right? And I thought, no, you can't do that. The kids being left out to dry, you know what I'm saying? And I thought that was really dumb. And when McLennan came, he said something that really opened my eyes, in my opinion, about him. He said, I got to take the weight off Larkin's shoulders. And I was like, wait a minute. We talk about it all the time. There's sometimes the stress of the game, the stress of having the leadership and all that stuff, like, it does weigh on you, especially when the team is losing. You know what I'm saying? Like, you're always asked the questions, why are you losing, and all this stuff. Sometimes it's not you, and you have to kind of give out the answer that you really don't want to give. You're giving out like, oh, we could play better, all that stuff. But deep down inside, you really want to tell what you want to say. And
right.
You couldn't say that because a captain can't call his own team out. He can't call his defenseman out or his coach out. So he's taking all the brunt. And I thought when McLennan came over and said, I'll take the brunt of it too, like, that was like an accountability measure. And you know how important accountability is. And any facet in life, like whether you're in politics, whether you're in sports, whether you're in acting or whatever the case may be, media, taking accountability for your actions, I think that's what separates the good ones from the great ones.
Oh, for sure. Because the thing of it is, and here's where, speaking of taking accountability, okay, here's another mark I'm going to give to Steve Yzerman, or another gold star for Steve, okay? Regardless of what other people in the hockey business think, one of the marks of a true leader and being accountable is Steve Yzerman recognized that what he had wasn't working. Granted, a little late in some cases, but the Yzerplan, I think, and this goes back to this, right? I think the Yzerplan has evolved from what it was when he first got here. I think what he envisioned when he first got here, I think he's had to modify that. And that's what good leaders do. He's accountable to that. He's saying, you know what, maybe what I had envisioned and my plan was originally isn't going to work, but you know what, I'm going to retool it, redesign it, redeploy it. And I think that's what he's done. So I think the Yzerplan you're seeing now may not look like the Yzerplan of 5 years ago, but credit to Steve Yzerman for that.
Yeah, that is what good leaders do. I mean, you could look at several GMs that they stick in their ways, and they think that, oh, my way is a highway, and then they end up getting fired. I think the thing that you have to do in sports, and we see with Brad Holmes with the Detroit Lions, like they've had to, develop players that, draft players late and do all this stuff that they have to do, and they have a set mindset of what they want in a player. And I think that's the most important thing, is getting the guys that fit your identity. And honestly, like sometimes I felt like the Red Wings were kind of waiting for that next budding star and them to get lucky in the draft. And when you're not getting lucky in the draft and you're not getting, that top 4 pick or top 2 picks, you're kind of like, all right, well, I'm gonna have to do something right now, and we're gonna have to figure out how we're gonna do this. And you're just gonna try to modify it. And that's exactly what they're doing right now.
Yeah, absolutely. So the question is, I think that we have to ask ourselves is it going to be sustainable long enough to secure a playoff spot? And which is more than likely a wild card. But I'll tell you that the conference is so tight.
It really is. Yeah, this is right here.
Yeah,
I mean,
look at that craziness.
The Atlantic Division, like you could be in the third spot with a couple wins. Like you're at 53 points, and the Senators are at 56. You look at the top wild card, you're only 3 points away from that too. So I mean, you're literally like the only teams that are running away with it is the Toronto Maple Leafs and the Florida Panthers, and we all knew that they were going to be pretty damn good. But I look at the statistics, I look at the standings, and I go, okay, can they get to the playoffs? I think so. It's going to be, right down to the wire, though. I think it's obviously, you look at all these teams in the NHL right now, like, I mean, Boston's having a hard time. Tampa Bay's having a hard time. We go back to it, like even teams like the Rangers and the Blue Jackets, they're having a hard time. Montreal, it just, look how bunched up it is. You got 52 points, and then between 52 and 56, I mean, there's like 9 teams right there. So it's insane.
Well, I'll tell you, I'm going to make another prediction for you here. I think the team that's going to fall from grace, and I said this, I think 3 or 4 weeks ago, and they fell down and then they went back up, it's going to be Boston. I think Boston's going to fall from grace. And what's going to help them along in the next week here is they got to play Winnipeg. And Winnipeg is just on fire. I mean, they far and away, someone's going to meet them in the Stanley Cup Finals, I believe. And so Boston has to play Winnipeg. I think that's going to be a problem for them. They're on a losing streak anyway. I don't see their next 4 games being friendly to them. And what's going to happen is I think they're going to start to fall. I think the Red Wings have a good opportunity to rise. But I think also, Columbus, and there's a couple other teams in there that are going to hang tough. I think they're going to hang tough, and the Red Wings are going to rise. I think a couple other guys are going to stay tough, and I think Boston's going to fall. I think they're going to find a real hit on their morale, and they're just going to kind of be in a free fall at the wrong time. That's what I think is going to happen to Boston. And so I think that is what is going to give an opportunity for Detroit. particularly because they have 2 games in hand on Boston right now to start
Yep.
with. So that's where I see the greatest opportunity for Detroit. I think Columbus is going to be on a bit of a tear. Is it going to be sustainable? I don't know. I think Columbus has been doing really well unexpectedly,
Yeah.
but I think that Detroit is built better than Columbus is. So I think as far as staying power goes, I think the Red Wings have a better chance to sustain wins and winning streaks than Columbus. I think Columbus is hot, but I think they're going to go real cold. I don't think you're going to see that with the Red Wings. We used to see it all the time. Now I don't see that as much. I think they're going to be far more consistent, and that's the key word. We've been looking for it for season after season now, game after game. Where's the consistency? Are they going to be shooting it out of the stratosphere? No. But if you look at their rise, it's very consistent, and I think their play is getting more consistent. And as a result, they're just going to keep getting incrementally better. It's not, like I said, they're not going to shooting to the stars or anything, but they're getting incrementally better. And I think that's going to happen for the duration of the season. That's my expectation. And that's why I think they're going to make it into a wild card spot. Would not surprise me if they narrowly squeak their way into the 3rd spot. But I think they're going to find themselves certainly in a wild card spot.
Well, I just look at it like this. I think the Rangers are going to be a team that's going to be one to watch out for. I think they can rise up to. The Flyers are a little bit different. I think they're kind of just a med team. They're not really that great, but they have some talent on that team. The Columbus Blue Jackets, I think they've been playing way above their head, in my opinion. And
Yeah.
I don't know when it's going to come down, but I think that they've been playing way above their head. Boston, they're having issues with Boston. I mean, like even the fans are going like, there is something going on with that team. Um, Ever since Bergeron retired, which we kind of know how it feels in Detroit, when you lose a guy as great as Bergeron and Krejci, those are 2 great centers. It's hard to replace them. It truly is. Like it was hard to replace Nicholas Lidstrom for years, until the Red Wings said, you know what, we need to rebuild. Let's rebuild. You know what I'm saying? You don't replace guys like that. And they try to do it with Elias Lindholm, and he looks awful. They tried to spend money with Lindholm and Zadorov. That hasn't really worked. Like they're trying to keep it afloat like the Red Wings did back, in 2014, 2013. They were trying to keep it afloat, after losing Lidstrom. And when you lose a guy like that, you're always chasing the next great thing. Like you're always trying to find the next great guy, and you think you have it, but you really don't. So you try to go in the free agent market and you try to get those guys. And we've seen what happened with this free agent market. Like these were the free agents that were available this summer, and like look at all these teams that sign these guys. Predators, they're not playing good. Boston, they're not playing good. The Oilers, they're playing pretty good. Arvinsson's a pretty damn good signing, but even Seattle, the Kraken, like, are any of these guys really moving the needle for those teams? No. So I think that Steve Yzerman actually did a good job at not taking the bait of like saying, "Oh, we're gonna go out there and we're gonna get one of these guys and overpay from," because I look at all those teams and they're woefully underperforming, and part of the reason they're underperforming is they paid so much for these guys, and it sucks to. I think we're gonna start to see some things in NHL where if you go out in free agency and start spending like that, you're gonna have a rough time. I think that's what's gonna really come back to fruition. It's just it's interesting to look back on those free agents that we wanted and see how those teams are doing right now, because I don't think any of them thought the Predators would be that bad. The Boston Bruins would be, hovering with a wild card spot. I mean, the Kraken they've been a total just disaster, to be honest. I mean, they signed Brandon Montour and that Chandler Stevenson kid, and they're not doing good. They're not a really good team. So, and they have one of the worst goaltending. So I mean, it's so funny the way that it kind of worked out. I was looking back at that a couple of days ago, and I was like, man, that's kind of funny to look back at and just think, wow, we could have signed those guys, and it could be a lot different right now, in my opinion.
Well, you know what I think it does is I think it throws the team out of balance when you do that. But also, and I've said this before, My friend Joe Gibbs, Coach Gibbs, he said, I don't need the best players. I need the right players. And we've said it 100 times. And it's the same thing. You can have the best players, but that doesn't mean you've got a winning team because they might not be the right players for you, for your organization right now. So I think that's the problem is that, maybe they just haven't found that synergy or whatever. They might not be performing. You can't necessarily take them out of this environment, put them over here, and a guy's going to perform equally well. But the Red Wings have some real opportunities coming up here in the next week, so if by some miracle, and I think it would take a miracle, maybe an off day, maybe Connor McDavid gets sick with whatever the thing is I had last week, maybe the avian bird flu will fly through Edmonton. I don't know. But on the off chance that we actually beat Edmonton and we can walk away from this 4-game stretch, picking up 3 games, picking up, 6 points, heck, even if we have to split one of them. Here's the thing. You've got the Bruins meeting Winnipeg. You've got the Senators coming up against the Capitals, which I think is a tremendous opportunity for the Senators to have perhaps a bad night. And then you've got Columbus is coming up against the Golden Knights, and they're fighting with Edmonton for that top spot. So they've got some real motivation there, and I think the Knights are going to crush the Jackets. So I think there's some real opportunity for movement just looking at the matchups here over the next week or so. So I'm gonna pray that the avian bird flu flies from here over to Edmonton and roosts right at Connor McDavid's backyard. And
the avian bird flu, that's hilarious.
Or the chicken flu. Well, you know what? That is why, I don't know if y'all know, but the reason why we're paying $10 a carton for eggs in Michigan is because of 2 really stupid government things. I mean, if you ever doubted that government was absolutely asinine, this is proof positive for you right here. The reason you're paying $10 a dozen for eggs is because the previous American administration, for my Canadian friends, our previous administration decided to kill off 100 million chickens, number one, because they were scared to death of this avian flu. So they killed off every chicken we had. Then the state of Michigan was stupid enough to compound that problem and say you could only sell free-range eggs. So
that's gonna be great.
Right. So, hey, if that can happen here, I say the chance of sending a contaminated chicken over to Connor McDavid's house might not be a bad idea. So anyway, but here's the thing. So we've got this. So I think given the matchups, the teams that Detroit's playing, the matchups that the closest competitors for that wild spot are playing, I think we've got a real opportunity here in these next 4 games, Joe, and I'm going to be real excited to talk about what has happened. Hopefully I'll be excited, but we'll definitely assess what's happened after this next week or so on our next show.
Yeah, I think Eric Miller nailed it with the big road trip coming up. I believe wins in Florida and Winnipeg could be a huge boost for this team because they did beat Winnipeg, as they have not won those places in years. If we can win in Florida and Winnipeg, they can win anywhere, and I agree with that. And then you look at this. I mean, this is the standings right here, and I'll put it up for the full screen, but God, I got to get the whole thing out. But you could look at it and you can see that the Oilers are number 1. The Canadians, the Flames are 55 points. They're 3 points out of a playoff spot, so they're going to be trying to do some, but they've lost 2 straight. The Vancouver Canucks have been a total wild card. You don't know what to expect on a daily basis from those Canucks. But you look at the Seattle Kraken, they got 47 points. They're 5-5 in their last 10 games. They're a 500 team at home. You look at look at the Canucks. They're under 500 at home, and Calgary is above 500 at home. So that's pretty good for them. But I mean, I look at this stretch, Cindy, and I can't sit here and say the Red Wings can't win all these games. I look at the Canadian. I look at not the Canadians. God, why do I keep saying the Canadians? It's just so stupid. But I look at the Oilers, right? I think they could be beaten. I think there's times where they look a little bit out of sorts. And I know McDavid is a damn good player and all that jazz, but you look at their schedule, and I think that they play what is it today? Today is the 29th. They play the next game they play is obviously the Red Wings. They played yesterday against the Kraken and they won 4-2. So I mean that tells you everything you know. And they beat the Canucks last Saturday 6-2. So I mean they're not really beating these great teams. So I'm interested to see what's going to happen because I look at the Oilers schedule, Cindy, and you know who they play after the Detroit?
Who do they play? I didn't look.
The Toronto Maple Leafs. And I
Yeah.
think
Oh, yeah. That's right. That's right. I did see
I
that.
think this could be like a little bit of a look ahead spot. You know, everyone always circles a game on their calendar, and I think that whenever you're a Canadian team, you circle that damn Maple Leaf game. You always do.
Yeah, you do.
Because you know that you're gonna get a lot of the media, a lot of the coverage. Toronto is one of the biggest markets in Canada. Um, so you circle that game, and I think that's a game that they could definitely be circling because that's February 1st. That's Saturday night. So I mean, they're going to be playing the game before Detroit plays Calgary. So you could have a potential look ahead spot that situation. So I look at that and I could go, okay, that could be a situation for them. But I look at the Canucks and the Flames and the Kraken, and I think those are all winnable games. I think the Flames could be a little bit sneaky because they could show up one game and then they don't show up another game. It's kind of I don't know what to make of them, to be honest. They're kind of like a back and forth kind of team. Like they never really are consistent with the way that they play. So it'll be interesting. But I think before that game that they play against Detroit, they play the night before against they play Thursday against Anaheim. So I mean that's not much of a test. But then they play a back to back. So they play Detroit and then they play Seattle, and we're gonna play Seattle that Tuesday. So it'll be interesting for sure.
Well, see, this is why I'm a little worried about the Canucks game, okay? Because they've got a 2-day break between the Oilers and Calgary. And I think they're going to go into Calgary ready, regardless of what happens with Edmonton. If they beat Edmonton, they're going to be on a high. And if they lose to Edmonton, they're going to be adjusted to the Western Canada environment. And they're going to be ready for the Flames, and they're going to be ready to recoup. But they play the Canucks like within 24 hours. They play them the very next day. I think Calgary's like a 10 o'clock game, and I think the Canucks are like a 9 o'clock or something like that.
The travel could be a little bit.
Yeah, I think that's going to be tough. I think they're going to be tired from that Calgary game, and I'm just not sure they're going to be able to rebound well enough to beat the Canucks. So that's why I'm worried about the Oilers because they're the Oilers, and I'm worried about the Canucks because of the scheduling.
Well, I'll tell you what, the Canucks scheduling, I think it's very interesting. So they're on an East Coast trip right now. They played in Washington, they won 2-1. They played in St. Louis, they won 5-2. They're going to be playing in Nashville tonight, the 29th. And then they're going to be playing Dallas on the 31st. So they're going to come back home after a road trip. And I think that's the time you really want this team. Because I think when you come back from a road trip, you kind of get too, comfortable. We see teams always struggle in the first period or second period, when they come back from a roadie. That's kind of why I'm kind of scared for the Red Wings, to be honest, when they come back from their road trip, because right after they come back from their road trip, they got a team that I think is going to be really tough to beat. It's going to be that Tampa Bay Lightning team. So, and that's the game before the Four Nations tournament really starts. So,
and Tampa Bay is going to be looking for some payback too.
Oh yeah, but luckily that game is at home. It's going to be a 1 o'clock game on a Saturday. It's going to be on ESPN, ABC, and all that jazz. Another one of those games where we got to hear the national media, go, oh, what's going on with the Yzerplan? All that, just the whole thing. But I really like that you get Vancouver on after a road trip because they're coming from the East Coast, and that they're not used to the East Coast, and they're going to be playing Dallas, which is a physical team, but Dallas lost Miro Heiskanen to a knee injury yesterday. I don't know if you saw that. You might want to, if you saw that knee injury, I feel bad for you because I've seen a lot of things happen in hockey or football and baseball and basketball, but that was like just the horrible luck. Like Mark Stone went right into his knee, and you could see that knee just kind of take a little left-hand turn.
Yeah, I'll tell you, I saw some of those brutal injuries during the Lions season. Oh my gosh.
Oh my God.
Mean, holy cow. Right. And, for as tough of a game as hockey is, you don't normally see those kinds of injuries. You see them in football more than hockey, but yeah, I mean, but I got to tell you, at least in football, you're usually not seeing blood. You're not seeing like blades across necks and stuff like that, you know?
I mean, I always say like football and hockey are kind of similar because, they require concentration, they require scheme and all that jazz. But there's no doubt that hockey, you got blades, potentially by your face. So that's not a good thing to have near your face. I don't, it just is what it is. And those skates are really, really sharp. I know a lot of people that they're like, no shit. I'm like, yeah, but they're, the NHL skates are way different from, just someone that's a beer league hockey player. Those skates are
absolutely.
sharp, man.
Yeah, it was something, one of the things I didn't realize, back in the day, and my guys who are old veterans and played 20 years ago, they would talk about they'd bring 5, like Darren said, he used to pack 5 pairs of skates. Now they've got the replaceable blades. It's like these guys don't know how good they have it now.
Yeah, those have been a very key thing because you see players on. I mean, those trainers they got the blades ready to go and they're just ready to snap them in. And I'm like,
Yep.
man, that's some great stuff. But yeah, back in the day, they didn't have the replaceable blades, so they had to get the whole skate on. You know how long that could take when you're trying to get a skate on it. It could take like 10 minutes or 5 minutes if you're good at it. Or, obviously you're gonna have help with the trainers, but you still got to get that skate on tight and not move any corners. And it's just like, man, hockey is a fun sport. But that mirror, if you go watch it, Cindy, you will be just
you don't see those kind of injuries often, not like that.
It was so oh my god. I kind of want to play it right now for you because I think that it would be interesting. But yeah, we got some more comments, so let's get to these. I watch ABC on mute.
We do too, Eric. We do too.
Well, Sean McDonough's all right, but some of the guys they got working with them, like I think what's the one guy he has like the loud voice, like Sean McDonough's all right because he kind of has like he's also the one that's has the voice when he says like it's a very entertaining play. His voice squeaks, which I think is hilarious, but it is what it is. Ed Thompson on YouTube says, "Does the younger Wings' recent performance versus Tampa give you more confidence against top tier teams going forward?" What do you think, Cindy?
Oh, for sure. Absolutely. And it's just like I said earlier, is the fact that look at their performance that these guys turned in with Kane and Tarasenko out of the lineup. These guys stepped up big time against, a pretty worthy competitor. So, absolutely. I think you're seeing, McClellan has let these guys loose. And he said, just play effing hockey, just play your game. And he's encouraging these young guys. And they don't have to worry about, hey, I'm going to piss off a veteran and take ice time. No, they're like, we got these injuries. It's an opportunity for you. And they're letting them just go. And absolutely 100% on that.
Yeah, I thought that was interesting. But yeah, here's that injury that I was talking about. I'm gonna bring it up because this will be not fun to look at, but it is what it is. Let me play it right now.
Vegas had a 9-point lead on Edmonton.
Oh.
And here we go. Hintz goes right after.
And of course, they're just getting in the fight. Yeah. So it's like, oh my god, man! Like that
look, and everybody's ignoring that poor guy. He's
all his knee just got taken out, and they're all like just beating each other up. It's like hockey's a totally different game. But yeah, I saw that. I was watching the game on ESPN. I was like, I'm trying to fall asleep. You know what I'm saying? I watched that. I started squirming. I was like, oh no.
Yeah, I think, and just to back up more on that last question in particular, the guys who've got me very excited about the younger Wings that I think they don't get rattled when they go up against these tough guys. And you've seen Edvinsson. He's not afraid of these guys. Casper. I don't even count Seider and Raymond anymore because they're like, veterans to me anymore. But some of the newer guys, Casper, Edvinsson, these guys are not afraid to get into it. They're not going to let anybody intimidate them.
No.
And that is key because that creates confidence on the ice. I tell you, I've seen a tremendous improvement in Simon Edvinsson from 2 years ago. Soderblom's out there now, and he's starting to, start using that size a little. But that's the other thing that you're seeing with these young guys that's encouraging is these big guys who we're so excited to get because of their size. You're seeing them not afraid to use that size. And I think that that's great. And then you've got I think Kasper's just an incredible talent. And he just does not seem rattled. He does not seem rattled by the, I think that's why I've got hope just in those three guys alone.
Yeah. Well, when Yzerman drafted Kasper and Edvinsson and, God, every player that he drafted, Danielson and all that and Pelika recently, he said the same thing with all those guys. And I thought it was very interesting, Cindy. He said, I want players who are tough to play against. And, you as a, fans don't usually think like that. They say, oh, I want the players that are, fast on the ice, scoring all these goals and all that stuff. But like, I think what wins you games in the grand scheme of things, and if you look across some of these teams right now, across the NHL, like the Oilers, I think they had to learn it. They had to get some tougher players to play against. I thought, you look at the Florida Panthers, they're a tough team to play against. I think the Maple Leafs, they're not that tough, but they have really good skilled players and they're pretty damn good. But I mean, you look at some of these teams and you go, they're tough to play against. When you go against them, they're gonna give you a game. And I think the same can be said about these young kids that are coming right now. Like Kasper, he's not out of his element playing on the first line. That's what surprises me the most. I mean, this is a kid that when Lalonde was here, he was playing him on the third line and fourth line, and we weren't really seeing what he could really do. Well, McLennan comes here, he goes, kid, you're going to the first line. We're gonna try you out and see what you do. And he's taken off and ran with it. I think that's kind of what you needed as a coach is let's take that necessary adjustment and let's try to get these young kids in the right position to succeed. Giving them more ice time. They could either float or they could bust out. And that's their decision. That's kind of like what their play dictates where they're going to go. But I thought with Kasper, he got up there, and when he got up there, you knew he was going to be playing really, really well.
Well, that's the thing, right? I mean, if these guys are you're talking about sink or swim or bust out or whatever, if that's going to happen, better find out earlier rather than later.
Right.
So you're finding out now, and you're giving them more time to develop and more experience on NHL ice and all that stuff. So I would I'm telling you, McClellan is a very, very, very smart coach. And I was told that right off the hop. As soon as word got around that he was going to probably be coming here, my NHL guys were like, nobody better. He's the guy.
He needed a guy like that, to be honest. Because I look at guys. I don't mean to cut you off, Cindy, but I look at guys like Dan Campbell and AJ Hinch, and I go, okay, what kind of characteristics do they have? Well, they both let the young players play. Like I thought with Derek Lalonde, he kind of hid like Johansson. He didn't want to give him the much playing time, and partly because he was fearing for his job. But I think if he would have played those guys, he might not be out of a job, to be honest. And that's kind of that's kind of where you, as a coach, that's where you sink or swim. If you're not really willing to take that risk, like the risk of AJ Hinch playing Trey Sweeney at shortstop, as a rookie. He comes up and he was a huge piece to the Tigers getting to the playoffs. You know what I'm saying? The Lions had to count on a bunch of young players this year, and they still won 15 games. So it's kind of like you either have that coach that's willing to take that risk with young players, or you have that coach that's kind of like, I don't really want to do that.
Well, and I think the other thing too that McClellan is not afraid to use and not afraid to encourage is physicality. And, my coach friends, there's like 3 or 4 of them that, and a couple of them, and they are just adamant that you have got to master the physical game, that physicality, if you want to win championships. Because when it comes down to it, that's what wins when you get down to the wire and you're playing for the cup or and you're in playoff games. You got to play physical. You've got to be able to do that. I mean, you got to have the sharp players too. You got to have the smart players. You got to have you got to have some guys with speed. You got to have all those things. But you can have all the talent in the world, but if your guys are not capable of handling a physical game and bringing a physical game to the opponent, then you are not going to last through to the finals. You're just not. And I think there's some truth to that. I like the fact that a lot of these young kids coming up also are not afraid to play physical. One of the things with the newer guys coming up, and I would hear this from kind of the older guys a lot, they'd be like, hey, these kids are fast and that's great. They're smart. That's great. But they're afraid to get hit. They've come up in this culture. And I think it's a societal thing, both in the United States and Canada. Kids were getting soft. They call them snowflakes for a reason. And the problem is that you're bringing these kids up that are grown up in this culture of sensitivity and all this stuff, even though they're bringing that it's infiltrating their game. And the problem is that doesn't win you championships. And they were saying, hey, that's a real liability. So these kids that they're bringing in now, and I don't know if it's because they're coming from Europe or just they've just been brought up in the game with a different mindset, but these are tougher kids, or at least kids that aren't afraid to get tough and to take their licks. They're not only are they not afraid to hand it out, which they can do, they're not afraid to take them either. They're not shying away from that. And I think that is also another key component to why some of these youngsters have been so impressive.
Well, I look at it like this. I watched a great video on this a couple days ago. It was on YouTube. I posted on my Facebook account. It was about the basketball, NBA, how the European players coming from Europe are more ready to play basketball than the American kids.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, interesting, because Kobe Bryant once had a quote about he went to Europe for a year to learn the game of basketball, total game of basketball. He wanted to learn all about it. So he went to Europe for a year, then he came back to Philadelphia, Lower Merion High School, got drafted by the Lakers and all that stuff. And where he was, a great player. But it goes back to what you just said is kind of what I feel about hockey right now. I feel like hockey right now, these American kids, these Canadian kids, I feel like they play a game that is a little bit different than the way that they're taught in Sweden or Finland or Russia or any Scandinavian country up there, to be honest. But I look at these guys like Casper, right? I think he's from Denmark or something like that, something along those lines.
Yeah, he's one of those smaller countries over there.
Yeah, and I know Seider is Germany. Edvinsson is Sweden.
Yeah.
Johansson's Sweden. Raymond's Sweden. And those are the kids that are playing really, really good. And the kids that you drafted from the college ranks, which it's usually not, you usually don't draft a kid from the college ranks in terms of the rubbings, because I think they want a guy that's more ready to build to play in the NHL, or they pick a college kid, because some of these college kids are coming in to play good hockey too, because I think the college kids are they're getting taught really well. It depends where you get your kid from. Red Savage at Michigan State, unfortunately he got a knee injury. He's going to be out for the year, but he was playing really, really well. And I think that what you just said about these kids from Europe playing a different game, I just think that they're more smart. The way that they play, they don't really need to use their physicality to win games, but boy, oh boy, when they need to play the physical game, they can play the physical game. And I was listening to Spittin' Chicklets, and Ryan Whitney was talking about his kid didn't learn how to take a hit till he was 11 years old, which is insane, because those kids over there in Europe, they're taking hits at 8 years old. And I know people want to protect these kids because they're, concussions and all that jazz. I mean, soccer is not really a concussion, stereotypical concussion sport, but they have more concussions than football and hockey combined. So you're going to get concussions.
I say this, if you don't want to risk injury, don't play a contact sport.
Don't play sports at all.
Play tennis, play golf, play something where, you're not having a contact sport, for God's sake. I mean, when you're playing a contact sport, you're risking injury. That's part of the game. It's part of the gig. Okay.
Yep.
And sometimes but you've got to learn. And this is one of the things that Darren told me very early on. I asked him, what's the difference between today's players and the players when you were playing? And he said, these guys don't know how to fight. They're not taught how to fight. So as a result, it actually creates more opportunity for injury because they don't know how to fight. They don't know how to protect themselves. They don't know how to do it right. And so they open themselves up to greater chance to get hurt. And they said they took that out of the game, teaching these guys how to fight. And so that's actually been not a good thing. So I think there's probably some truth to that for sure. But we'll have to see what this playoff holds. But I think we're going to have the Red Wings in it. And I'm staking my claim on that. And, the Lions let us down a little bit. I think the Wings are going to redeem it. I really do.
Yeah, I just think that, it's all about coaching. And I look at a guy like McLennan, I think he can get it done. I look at JB Pickerstaff with the Pistons. I think he can get it done because they both coach the same way. They're a little bit harder they're a little bit harder coaches to play for, but they mean well. And for a young team, I think that's what you really need. And I think the veterans even were like, "Look, we needed this shit. Like we really did. Like we needed a guy who was gonna tell us like, no, you're an idiot for doing this. Like that's kind of the things that we needed for this Red Wings team." And you're starting to see it come to fruition. They're starting to win games, not the stereotypical way they've won the past couple of years, where they would do a comeback. I thought the last 3 games they played really well. They had to come back 2-0 against the Kings yesterday. But for the most part, they've been playing really good hockey overall. And I think going into the Western Canada road trip, this could really be a deciding moment in this season. Because if you can go 3-1 in this moment and then come back to Tampa Bay,
terrific positioning if they can go.
You have like you said, you have a terrific opportunity for you to get some momentum before the Four Nations tournament. Then these guys can rest up because I think a lot of them aren't playing in the game. I think Raymond and Larkin are the only players that are playing in the game, and we'll see if they injuries or they'll pull themselves out. But I just think that this Red Wings team is heading in the right direction. I think we both agree that this team has needed a change of scenery with the head coach, and I think that they've been playing like it. And I'm very, very excited about what the Red Wings can do over the last part of the season. We're going to bring you guys all the coverage you need. We're going to be on a more consistent schedule now that, I'm not doing the Lions stuff. And I think, we know Cindy's schedule, her schedule is a little bit opened up too. So, we're going to do a podcast every week. We usually do it around like the Red Wing games because we really don't want to do it the day of because then people like don't want to tune into the podcast because they're like, oh, I'll just catch it afterwards. And then we're talking about the game before and it doesn't seem good. So we got a couple comments I want to get to before the end of the podcast. There's a couple comments. Let's get to them. Ed says, finesse guys win scoring title, grind line guys win championships.
There you go, Ed.
He's exactly right. And I think that's exactly what it is, man. When you brought that up, Cindy, the first team I thought of when you said, you need fight to win, you need physicality to win a championship. And I thought, Florida is a physical team. Toronto, not a physical team. Case closed. It's kind of what you said. And the Vegas Golden Knights, they were a physical team too. And the Lightning and all that stuff. They're all physical, so you're exactly right about the physicality. It's definitely needed and Ed was right too with the finesse guys win scoring titles and grind line guys win titles.
I love it. Well said, Ed. Well said.
Well said, Ed. And we will see you guys in the next Red Alert podcast. We talk more Detroit Red Wings hockey here on the Red Alert podcast. I'll do daily videos on the J Sports, so if you want to do some daily stuff, go subscribe there. We'll get you all situated. I'm gonna do a couple of videos during the Four Nations tournament. We're gonna look back at some of these seasons and everything like that. But we'll see you guys in the next podcast. We talk more Red Wings hockey on the Red Alert podcast. Thank you for listening. Thank you for watching. If you're watching live, if you're listening on the podcast platform, thank you for listening, and we will see you guys in the next podcast. We talk more Detroit Red Wings hockey.